If you remember back to my previous video, the range extender in the i3 failed again before I even managed to take it on the camp trip, which put a damper on the whole trip really, but we made light of it by having jokes about how my hybrid never made it and all that stuff. And someone else had a Kia Niro plug-in hybrid which did make it, so they were getting called the hybrid that made it and I was the hybrid that didn't, so that was quite funny. But anyway, this time it's due to a temperature sensor. Most likely it's just a faulty temperature sensor and not actually something that's overheating. So usually what will happen is, if the error goes away by itself and I run the range extender, it comes back up again as soon as I switch it off. So the way to solve this is to check the wiring going from the range extender generator to the generator control module, which basically uses the generator as a motor to start the engine and also takes the power from that generator unit and charges the battery with it. So there's some fault round about that area. So what's happening is our temperature sensor is reporting a value which is out with a threshold value set in the vehicle software somewhere, and it also results in this error here, magnetic excitation not symmetrical. So when you explore this error, that error occurs basically when the engine temperature is very high and its speed is very low, round about 50 RPM, and the only time you'll encounter that is during startup or shutdown. And in my case the error must be coming up around shutdown because I'm actually able to run the range extender sometimes. And we're also getting a temperature not plausible error, and that means that it's basically calculating some sort of temperature from various sensors and they're not actually matching up with actual values. I'm not exactly sure how it works. So to rectify this, I'm going to take the car along to my neighbour's house. He's got this pit in the ground in his garage which I can go in and then basically drive the car over it and give it a good inspection. I'm going to remove a panel from the bottom and inspect the wiring which goes from the range extender generator to the control module. And basically there's a problem there. I think sometimes even if the wiring there is not good, it could throw up these errors. So without further ado, I'll get along there and see if my neighbour's in and we can get this fixed. So the first thing we need to do before working on the electric vehicle is to disable the high voltage system. To do this you just switch the car off, lock it, and I usually wait till I hear a click coming from underneath it. That means that the high voltage contactor in the battery has disengaged and there's no longer high voltage flowing, but you still need to deactivate it in the front. So to inspect that cabling, the suspect cabling, you'll need a 13mm socket to get the bolts off here and here, and a 16mm socket to take off the 3 bolts located here. So once you've taken this off, the cable which you need to inspect is actually on this side. There's 2 cables which need to be inspected. One is the 3-phase high voltage cable coming out of the generator unit which goes into the control module, and there's another one which needs to be inspected which is, I think, for temperature sensors and the rotor position sensor. So if we get this part off just now, hopefully I'll be able to gain access to those. So the best course of action here would be to take out the smaller 13mm bolts first and then move on to the 3 big 16mm bolts which actually hold the whole thing together, because these panels are actually riveted to this V section here. So if you take those ones out first, the whole thing won't actually fall on your head. So with all of the smaller bolts removed, we start removing the larger one, and this thing here starts coming apart in two halves. So that's pretty good. I thought the whole thing was going to come down as one huge thing, and then it would be pretty difficult to put back together. And as always, a bit of WD-40 does help. So this is where I have to be careful. Hopefully this whole thing isn't really heavy. So if you just take it off like this, you should be fine. Should be off soon. Yeah, you get the idea. Okay, so once you get one side off, there's this plastic piece here which is somehow attached on. I'm not too sure actually how to get this to detach itself without breaking it. So I think the best idea is just to leave it hanging like that and to just take the other side off. Well, that didn't actually go too much to plan because the ratchet as well as one of the bolts ended up in the water, and this whole thing ended up falling down, so that's not totally ideal, but much of what I need to inspect is now exposed, so we can have a good look at it now. Under here we can see the air conditioning compressor, the high voltage cable coming from the battery which powers the whole car, and that's just the battery charging unit, which takes in the AC from the grid and then charges a high voltage battery. And there is a range extender control module, so that'll basically supply three-phase power to the generator unit here to start the engine. Once the engine's running, the power is going to flow back through this three-phase cable here back into that controller. It's going to come out of the controller. That's actually the outlet from the range extender, and it seems to go into the charge control module here. So another thing to note is the slightly leaking oil filter there. The motor looks as if it's seen better days. Underneath the heat shielding it's just all corroded, so I've just removed the, sorry, not the heat shielding, the sound shielding. It's all corroded, so I've just removed it anyway. So the car will make a bit more noise now. That's one thing I'm not a great fan of, those pretend noises that electric cars, the newer ones, have to make so that people can hear you, but most of the noise that comes off a car is from the tyres anyway, so if someone's paying attention, normally electric cars are not a problem. So after I've removed that connector, straight away I could see a problem. Moisture has actually gotten inside it, and it's like in here there's corrosion. You can see on the inside there, that's not supposed to be there. And probably if I was to take this apart further, I'll find that the moisture has actually gone up inside the cable. So that could be part of the problem. Well, I'm not sure exactly how that's causing a temperature sensor error. So maybe the temperature sensor is in this area somewhere, and if so, I'm not actually disassembling the car any further to get into that area, because to actually access that, it looks like quite a huge involved job. That's actually a structural component of the car, and I do not have the mechanical experience to start removing stuff like that. So I'm inspecting now what I think may be a temperature sensor. So that could be this bit here, which is going into the range extender generator. Looking at the actual contacts in this connection for the high voltage wiring, I don't see much in the way of corrosion on them. They seem not too bad to me. I can feel moisture there though, so moisture has gotten into that connection, which is not fantastic. So what I'm going to try and do is check and see if the temperature sensors may be damaged. I'm not 100% sure that is a temperature sensor, but I'll have a look at it anyway. So in regards to that connection, once I took out those two screws, I wasn't pulling on it too much, but it just wasn't coming out, so I'm just leaving it alone because I think maybe the whole thing has to be disassembled to get to that. So what I'm going to do is just clean any crap out of this that I can and just put it back together. Well, sadly I cannot do very much more than what I've already done because I simply just do not have the tools and knowledge to disassemble these systems any further. So unfortunately it's going to have to go back to BMW again, and I'm trying to work out a deal with them where I can just trade this thing in and get a good deal on a 94 amp hour fully electric i3 without the range extender. So that'll mean that if I ever want to make a really long journey, what I can do is simply just chuck a 3 kilowatt petrol generator in the boot, and if I need to stop for a couple of hours to charge up, then so be it. Because I think it's really just not worth it hauling around 120 kilograms of engine. That's like pretty much 2 extra people my size in the car, which you're carrying around with you all the time and hardly ever using. So I just don't think it makes sense considering the amount of bother that you get with them. The i3 is a car that I love quite a lot actually. I think it's the best electric car you can get in the price range. The only thing is the reliability of the range extender just isn't there. This car has never ever broken down in a way that I've been totally unable to drive it, apart from when I got a puncture, but that's no fault of any of this. So yes, it's a car that I highly recommend, but the range extender really is just more hassle than it's worth. It makes the servicing more expensive for something you're hardly ever using, and I'm just kind of regretting it. So that's all from me pretty much. I'm going to just get all of this put back together, and I'll show you me reactivating the high voltage system and getting it started up again. Well, I'm back now, so the drivetrain error has cleared itself, so I reckon it is just wiring somewhere that's got a problem. So I've no idea where that wiring is or what it could possibly be, but I reckon that if I start the range extender up again and go for a run, let it heat up and then shut it off again, it'll probably come back. I'm thinking the error might be something to do with that little plug on the range extender generator unit that I pulled out. Not the big high voltage one, but the little one next to it, so maybe that's a temperature sensor, I don't know.